to now be lifted. Chair of the advocacy group AIMS, Dr. Creesha Lynch, would like to see other hospitals now follow suit.
We're absolutely delighted to hear of the lifting of these restrictions. We would like to see a full return to all pre-COVID restrictions where partners would feel that they are welcome within all maternity units, because obviously we're hearing this from Holles Street. It may not be the case in many other units, and certainly we'd have reports that in other units there still are many restrictions in place.
And finally, there's been an earthquake in County Donegal. The Irish National Seismic Network has confirmed a 2.5 magnitude quake was felt near Glenveigh National Park yesterday morning. It says it's received reports that the event was felt throughout the county and was recorded by seismic stations across the country. The network is asking people who felt yesterday's quake to make a report on its website. And that's your news at 2:02.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Summer showers in Lahinch? No thanks. Your kids will prefer Lanzarote, Lisbon or Lille.
Mostly dry today with sunny spells. Becoming cloudy later though, with the chance of some light rain or drizzle. Highs of 16 to 19 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now you're very welcome along. So happy to say we are bringing the Sunday Papers live this afternoon. Conor McKeon of The Independent, Gavin Cooney of The42 here in studio. You're both very welcome.
How are you, Joe?
Thanks, John. Great. So front page of the Sunday Times, we have a picture of Big Sam. At least he stopped Haaland is the headline. So Man City ace fails to score against Leeds, but Allardyce reign starts with defeat. Alongside that, on the front page of the Sunday Times, story about Messi. PSG. Well, the word seemed to be that PSG were pretty happy to let Messi go, but now PSG are very much leaving the door open for Messi to stay put, says Duncan Castles. He's undergoing a 2-week internal suspension after breaking strict club rules. He missed Monday's scheduled training session to fly to Saudi Arabia for a lucrative commercial engagement, but on Friday afternoon, he surprised senior PSG officials by making a public apology on social media. So it seems they would like him to stay. He is, of course, free agent this summer. Barcelona lurking, although the piece says they'll have to cut their budget by €200 million to re-register Messi, which is, not nothing. And then Saudi Arabia's Pro League, you won't be surprised to hear, is very much lurking, as is the MLS. Although the piece does say that even though Ronaldo is getting €400 million net over 2 years, Messi has observed his difficulties in adjusting to life at Al Nassr. So that's Messi's situation. We all have problems. I guess his are a slightly higher class. And then Anfield crowd drown out national anthem on front page of the Sunday Times.
So that is exquisite understatement there by Messi. Or sorry, a source close to Messi. Ronaldo's difficulties in adapting. I think read between the lines, the league is crap.
Yes.
Is what they're saying.
Ronaldo in a type of purgatory hell situation, I suppose, is the context there. Mail on Sunday. Picture from Scotstoun last night. Glasgow 5, Munster 14. This is the first defeat for Glasgow at home in 17 months. Munster have turned their season around in a big way. Winners against Glasgow, they'll face Leinster in a URC semi-final now in a week's time, although quite a few injuries sustained just last night. Peter O'Mahony, Orgie Snyman, Conor Murray, Dermot Barron all injured. Leinster meanwhile cruised past the Sharks 35 points to 5 as they do. We have the Sunday Mirror then, and a picture of Ten Hag. The headline is Tense Hag. So Ten Hag is very keen for the takeover situation to be sorted out ASAP in time for the summer transfer window, really. And alongside that, interestingly, Spurs to land Xabi. So beautiful Xabi Alonso, that jawline, that hairline could be coming to a Spurs dugout near you. He's doing great things with Bayer Leverkusen, and the Mirror say that he is Levy's number one choice, 41 years of age, to replace Antonio Conte. There are different names elsewhere, as we'll come to in a moment, being suggested as Levy's number one choice. You could have blown it. That's Pep's words to Erling Haaland after he gave the penalty to Gundogan yesterday against Leeds. We have the Sunday Independent then as well. It's a picture of Hugo Keenan last night for Leinster as they did cruise past the Sharks. Leinster march on, 5-try rout of Sharks keeps Blues on course for the double. And beneath that, Spurs facing 10 million feet to land Nagelsmann. So interestingly, Mirror are saying it's very much about Xavi Alonso, whereas Matt Law here on the front page of the Sunday Independent is saying Nagelsmann is the number one target, and because Bayern Munich have him on gardening leave, they will have to pay Spurs, that is, £10 million sterling to Bayern just to release him from gardening leave. So they are your back pages. There we go. Anything catching your eye in the football yesterday in particular?
Well, I mean, it was obviously observed, the booing of God Save the King, as it's now been rewritten, at Anfield before the Premier League game against
I did see,
Brentford.
and I bet my life on it, that Luke Ayling was singing God Save the Queen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I bet my life.
I wouldn't blame him, you know. I mean, it's not been rewritten for that long.
Yeah. I don't think it was a stance. I don't think he was refusing to recognise King Charles. Yeah, I just think force a habit more than anything.
Not my king, or not my monarch. I suppose he didn't bring out one of those placards for fear of the reaction he might get. But I was just, Martin Samuel, the voice of football, or the voice of sport, as he's now tilted in the Sunday Times, writing that the self-serving league must learn from Anthem debacle. So making the point that there is no need for the Premier League to play God Save the King. I really liked how he phrased it. Are we done with the Premier League trying to insert itself into every national event, self-servingly desperate to be part of occasions that have nothing to do with football? There was absolutely no reason to play God Save the King at football matches yesterday.
Yes, he said it was idiotic, not least when it became clear that Liverpool would be at home on the day of the coronation. So he says that Liverpool is an anti-establishment club now. That defines the club. And he hastens to add Sir Kenny Dalglish, Ian Rush MBE, Jordan Henderson MBE. They are not necessarily anti-establishment, but the club itself is on the back of Hillsborough in particular. And so to force this on the clubs, which is what the Premier League did by suggesting it might be a good idea for you to play the anthem, that really left him with no choice. And he just thinks this was idiotic and created nasty enough scene, really, for no good reason. Yeah,
and he raised the point, why did the Premier League want the anthem to be played? And I really don't understand why either, because it is an English competition, or a British competition in one sense, but it's an international league. Its relationship with the UK government doesn't go as far as, say, welcoming some kind of impending regulation of the league from the government. So it's just this weird thing or element of the Premier League that's sprung up in the last 5 years as it's become, more ultra-capitalist and more ultra-international. It wants, around the poppy every year we have these kind of festivals of solemnity and observance, and this is another example of it, and I don't really know why. And I also don't know why it's being treated as something like this state-sponsored coronation as something unique, given we see it every year when Man City win the title.
There's also a case where sort of big level sport, the highest profile sport with the greatest number of eyeballs attached, they're great promotion vehicles for whatever brand of nationalism it is that you're trying to push. Like you see it at the Super Bowl, the ridiculously overwrought versions of the Star Spangled Banner and the displays of American military, the jets going overhead. People might just think that that's bells and whistles, but it's not. It's making a point, and it's like, this is the big sporting activity. Everybody's watching the Super Bowl, and here's a display of American nationalism, through it's more of a military thing. But I would imagine that there's probably deeper ties between the Premier League and the sort of, the British hierarchy, politically speaking, than is immediately apparent to all the rest of us. We play around the Veen in this country before every GAA match. That is a thing that happens, and nobody bats an eyelid. But when they play God Save the King, as it is now, before the Premier League games, that probably shows that it's probably less clear cut than we feel it is over here.
But good of the King to play the Champions League music for his coronation. Dear, that was the big surprise for a lot of people. Zadok the priest. I had only realised that when the Queen died.
Did this actually happen? I thought that was a gag.
Oh no,
he did play the Champions League.
But sorry, Zadok the priest, when the Queen passed away and they reshowed her coronation for that week-long football festival, I suppose, in the aftermath, what struck a lot of people about the 1953 coronation was that the Champions League music was being played for the coronation.
No, I missed this.
Oh yeah, so if you go back and watch the coronation at like the moment, the crucial moment, in effect,
The champion.
I mean, you couldn't but sing it. Yeah, I don't know the lyrics of Zadok the priest, but it's not the champions.
It's just the champions over and over again.
And do you think the Queen quietly lived all of her life sitting there watching Champions League on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, thinking to herself, "Did it already, lads?"
Yeah, 53, of course. The point is made as well on no reason to play it. King Charles has no apparent interest in football, whereas his son William is president of the FA and a big Aston Villa fan. So when his time comes, it may be different. I don't know. It's Martin Samuel, page 5 of the Sunday Times. Just on the football theme for a moment, as soon as we've jumped off on football. Wayne Rooney. Here's a strong opening to his column. Manchester City will not just beat Real Madrid in their Champions League semi-final, they'll blow them away. So I know most of us instinctively feel City will do that, but then very quickly we say, well, geez, though, Real Madrid in this competition are a curious beast. But Rooney's not too worried, really. A year ago, Madrid put City out of the competition at this stage, but the dynamics are different now. City are better at the back. They're a more patient team who in the Champions League have been playing like they've learned from the European experiences. But the biggest change is Erling Haaland, of course, he says. And he says of last year, where in the second leg of the Bernabeu, City conceded twice in stoppage time and then early in extra time to blow a 2-goal lead, that did not tie in with the previous pattern of exits under Guardiola. There was no pattern at work. Guardiola did not overthink. At the Bernabeu, I thought City's performance was incredible. Pep got his tactics spot on. The team just had a mad 5 minutes. It does happen sometimes. And he goes on to talk about how Haaland have made City not just scary with the ball, but also super scary without the ball. They can kill you on the break. And then he's pretty effusive about the much maligned Ancelotti. And he does this very well in his columns, actually. He brings you back into the guts of 15 years at Manchester United, where he just has a whole array of games to bring you experiences of. So he talks about playing Milan in 07. Ronaldo was playing off the left for us, and for them Cafu bombing forward from the right hand side. Every time Cafu went upfield, Gattuso would step in from the middle of the pitch to backfill the gap where he would foul and frustrate Ronaldo until he nullified the threat. And I remember thinking what a clever ploy that was. So again, Ancelotti is more than just a raised eyebrow and a make you feel good kind of a merchant. And as a final point, I think you have to put City up there with United's 99 treble winners as the best Premier League team of all time if they win the Champions League, as he expects them to do. And he says ROH United team were also a great side, but the way City dominate opponents and make it look so easy so often while constantly fighting on all fronts is way beyond what we did. So as much as it pains him, as he says in the piece, Rooney absolutely effusive about this Manchester City team.
Yeah, I mean, he's goading fate there by writing off Real Madrid so resolutely before a Champions League game. I mean, we did this on a kind of a bi-weekly basis last season or last spring, and Madrid made fools of everyone. But it is hard, I know. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. It is hard to see City not winning this and then going on to win the Champions League.
Yeah.
I mean, Rooney's point is very interesting as to how Haaland has changed them. So at the start of the season, we were looking at Haaland and like City basically weren't passing him the ball, and you're wondering, well, they don't know how to play with this guy. And Jonathan Wilson has a good line in his Observer piece that appears in the Sunday Independent that it's become a kind of creative tension. And Bernardo Silva touched on it when he was talking after the quarter-final win. It's just like we realise that we don't always need to have the ball. Like City destroyed Bayern really, but didn't have the majority of the possession for the first time in God knows how long. And Silva said we know we don't need to have the ball anymore because they've brought in that kind of, Liverpool like terrorising counter-attacking thrust with Haaland. So now it is kind of interesting, most managers have a sell-by date usually because they can't move on from their great ideas, where Guardiola we think is this ultimate philosopher, an ultimate idealist, an ideologue, but he's kind of changed how he plays as well. And where City, to go back to Zadok the priest, I assume it wasn't booed at the coronation back in the 1950s, but the Man City fans have been booing that anthem for years, and there's been this very strange relationship between City and the Champions League. Do they really love this competition and embrace it? There seems to be almost a status anxiety about them in the Champions League in the early years, but Haaland loves it. It was only a little thing, but after After the Leipzig game or after the Bayern game in the quarterfinals, he tweeted like nothing but love for this competition. No Man City player or anyone associated with the club could say that about the Champions League. So maybe that gets them over the line.
That point as well about Pep Guardiola being, an ideologue, but obviously more versatile. Like in previous years, the trope has been, well, Pep is overthinking this, and that's why they don't win the Champions League, because they're going away from the thing that has got them that far, and he's tinkering too much. When I watched them the other night against Arsenal last week, and like it was such a fundamental change to how they usually played. They played with two pivots, with Rodri and Gundogan in a much deeper role. De Bruyne played literally off Haaland. It was almost like watching Robbie Keane playing off Niall Quinn, expecting that Arsenal's midfield and two would press up, and the amount of ball that they got in behind Arsenal was absolutely, because they knew that Arsenal were going to try and defend on the halfway line. So there was an example of the most important Premier League game of the season, if you want to put it that way. He made a very fundamental change to the team, and it paid off. So I think it's one of those things you always notice when it doesn't come off, but you have to kind of pay tribute and recognise as well when it does come off. Just on the Wayne Rooney piece as well, just looking at it from a kind of boring journalism eye, editors will always tell you to make sure you have something very snappy and a strong line and early on in the piece. He goes all out here in the first line of the piece by saying Manchester United will not just beat Real Madrid in the Champions League, they'll blow them away. And then he ruins it by saying, of course I may be wrong.
That's true. That was a Freudian slip on your part. Are you a Manchester United fan?
No.
All right. Because you said Manchester United will beat Real Madrid there.
No, I'm definitely not Manchester.
Interesting. Let's go to Colin Boyle and check in at the Connacht football final. 30 minutes on the clock. Galway 2-6, Sligo 4 points. So the bright start from Sligo has been punctured here, Colin.
Yeah, it was punctured after 9 minutes, Joe. A Galway goal, a long ball over the top with the Sligo full-back Eddie McGuinness just got the flight of that ball all wrong. Reddit came out in front, the ball went over the top to Damien Comer, who read it brilliantly, and he fit past the ball across to Matthew Tierney. He slipped it to the net. It was the same two players involved for the second goal as well. Comer intercepted a crossfield ball for Sligo just around the midfield area, ran all the way in and hand passed it across to Tierney, and again he was there to finish the goal chance. Outside of that, there's been two Shane Ward frees, a fisted point from Killian McDade. That's the second member of that Galway half back line to get a fisted score as well, and another fisted point from Matthew Tierney. Sligo's solitary response has been a 45 from Niall Murphy. So after all the good play for the first 5 or 6 minutes where they scored 3 points, they've only a point scored in the last 28 minutes of play, and this is all with the win, Joe. So you really feel that this game is only going one way.
You sure do. Okay, thanks Colin for the time being. So Galway in total control against the breeze as well in the Connacht football final. We're here with Gavin Cooney of the 42 and Conor McKeon of the Independent as well. What strikes me about City, and of course you have to note the 115 charges looming as the context, but in Haaland, and I think as well in Grealish, I've never enjoyed watching them more as a team. It's just a touch more alive than
they're slightly different to
possession brilliance.
They're slightly different to the kind of preeminent teams of the various different eras, insofar as they are that bit more flexible.
Yeah.
You know, like their two wingers aren't pacey wingers. You know what I mean? Like Grealish is obviously a very good dribbler and he's very penetrative, but he always cuts inside on his right foot. And it's the same with Mahrez on the far wing. There's no kind of real speedsters there, and the control that they have over the ball when Rodri in particular gets it. But even like Akanji, like I'm not sure that anybody else was interested in buying Akanji, and all of a sudden he arrived into the City team. And he's keeping Kyle Walker out of the team. So like you'd always view these things in retrospect and say, well, obviously you're going to win everything with all these great players, but I think there's definitely a touch of that Pep Guardiola has made a lot of them great players.
Yeah.
I was reading that book about Barcelona recently, and you know we think of Sergio Busquets as being one of the great sort of defensive midfield pivots of all time, and Pedro that was on that team as the quick winger, but they were languishing in the Barcelona reserves and the B team. They weren't going to get anywhere till Guardiola came in and said, this is going to be my style, this person. They both have a very they both have a skill set that can play a role in that team, and sometimes you kind of don't forget that there's more coaching and management that goes into creating really good sides than simply just talent accumulation.
Yeah, but I did like that against Arsenal they boot the ball long to Haaland. It just added a certain variety to their play which wasn't there in recent years for me. And it's funny, I was talking to somebody who knows Jack Grealish, and this is not speaking out of turn overly, it's not dramatic or anything, but Grealish was talking about what Pep wants from him, and the line was, I have to stay on that left hand. He divides the pitch up into various quadrants, I suppose. I have to stay on that left hand side. If and if I come out of that, he'll take me off.
Yeah.
Just take me off. But once I get the ball, I can do whatever I want.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because you'd imagine that the manager that encourages free expression and allows attacking players to reach their potential will be like, you're smarter than me. You go, you do you, Jack.
Smell it, Jack. You do what you got to. No.
Whereas you have to follow exactly what I tell you. It's kind of an almost counterintuitive way of thinking about creativity. But look, Grealish, I didn't really think he was going to reach these levels. I didn't think he was as... I was surprised that he joined City in the first place. I thought he was more of a Man United player than a Man City player, to be honest. And he did kind of struggle last season, but he's been... if you're picking a team of the year, it's hard not to put Rashford to the left of that front three. But Grealish in the last few months, I think, has done one of the best players.
Thoroughbred and said, "I'll break him." Might take me a year, but I'll break him.
It was. I watched the Man City All or Nothing before, and I was struck by Mikel Arteta when he was doing a bit with the wingers, and he said that he hated the ball from the full back up the line to the winger because the winger has nowhere to go, and he said that the defender is then on the bum, as he said, of the winger. And ever since watching that, anytime I watch Arsenal, if you look at when the ball is played to Bukayo Saka, he's always coming off the sideline.
Well, the best example being at Anfield.
Yeah, and it's impossible not to see it now because it's in your head. And you can wow the people whose company you're in with your football knowledge by saying, "Wait, you see, he'll come in off."
If you think that goal where he comes off the wing and Robertson slips, that's how that goal happens. And I would say a defining aspect of Republic of Ireland wing play over the last 20 years has been for full back to pass it straight up the line to winger with defender up his backside, and we're going nowhere.
Yeah.
But how blessed we are, because this is that's a few minutes there on what a genius Guardiola is. But we're also watching the league next door to us on our televisions that has Sam Allardyce, an even greater mind.
I know. Well, indeed. Just to mention, by the way, page 2 of the Sunday Times to finish off in that Man City game yesterday, and Man City at large. Keane's Leeds stint offers him chance at a reboot, says Paul Rowan. So there's nothing revelatory as such in the piece. It touches on Keane and the $250,000 a year from the FAI and a sense of the limbo that he was in, perhaps from a managerial point of view. The Leeds stint is a much needed reboot, and the door to him being Ireland manager at some point is not closed. But the man who blazed a trail now has some catching up to do, is the closing line of the piece. And he got the call on Wednesday, courtesy of Sammy Lee's jury duty. I mean, it's just like... She's like, this is all so weird. But you
Coronation Street stuff.
So Sammy Lee can't be alongside Big Sam because the judge is screwing him, frankly. And so Keane got the call. He was on the flight as soon as he got the call Wednesday morning and arrived over. And so, it's a bit of a chance for him. Boy, was he excited to be on the same dugout as Pep.
Yeah. I don't think anyone could have watched that game on television for more than 5 minutes and not realise that Robbie Keane was part of the Leeds coaching staff. He was obviously to the forefront of the entire drama about the touchline. It's a good opportunity for Keane. He really wants to be a manager, and I'm very excited and very interested to see how it goes. The FAI thing for Keane was a bit of a mess for all parties. I don't think Keane did anything wrong in that scenario, but it was a bit of a mess. But he wants to be a manager. He said his probably his own reasons for not going and taking the plunge in the last 6 months or so. But I'm really interested to see how it goes, because the journalist in me admires Robbie Keane's contacts book. It is unrivaled. He's got access to all of the great coaching minds in Europe, really. He spent time at Real Madrid with Ancelotti. He obviously knows Modric from his time at Spurs, and now he's on this UEFA committee of football geniuses, basically. This board of football heads, like Mourinho is on it, Vieira is on it, Benitez is on it, all these guys, Maldini's on it, I think, as well. All these guys who are who are basically the UEFA brains trust and going to feed into UEFA how they should change the game, etc. So Keane is keeping rarefied company on that, so he's got a hell of a lot of ideas to tap into when he does take the plunge into management, and I'm really looking forward to seeing when he does it.
It will be interesting to see if Leeds manage to stay up. They've Newcastle next, then they've West Ham, and they have Spurs at Ellen Road. 4 points might be enough. It's certainly doable. Will Leeds look at Big Sam and Robbie and say 3-year deal? Or what happens to Sammy Lee? Surely the case can't go on forever.
It might.
He can't be on jury duty.
It could be an OJ job.
Just some Kafkaesque disaster that keeps Sammy Lee out of frontline football.
You just have to say, though, to go from Marco Bielsa to Sam Allardyce is a wild, wild jump.
Madness. It's the most bizarre industry.
But this season in particular has been particularly dumb. It's
true.
Not just Leeds. It's most of the clubs in the league have completely lost the run themselves this year. You know, money makes people desperate. And I remember there's an old Sepp Blatter line that football makes people mad. It's a pretty heady mix. I think Leeds and many Premier League teams.
It'd be a decent level shortlist for the biggest shambles in the Premier League this year. Like between Chelsea and Spurs.
Chelsea are runaway leaders.
Yeah, well, Spurs managed to do a good harakiri there towards the end of the season as well.
But I think the moment when Frank Lampard sat in the Bernabeu and couldn't explicitly or categorically deny that he was given the job on the word of James Corden.
Yeah, just deny that.
I feel that was the moment when Todd Bowley, the great disruptor, I think you've disrupted the wrong thing, pal.
Did you watch the James Corden finale to his 8 years
when
chat show?
They smashed up his stage? Or
yeah, did you watch the
I saw
show?
clips.
I mean, I watched it all, intending just to think it was terrible.
Yeah.
God, it was bloody good.
Was it, Jim?
Oh my goodness.
My sister's just back from New York with her boyfriend, and they said they went straight to the restaurant where the guy, I can't remember the name, is it called Manifest or something like that, and they went straight to that restaurant because they said fair play to your man for calling out, and started the ball rolling. Eventually got James Corden kicked out of...
It seems that way. Balthazar,
yes, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Listen, I hope she was well behaved, social media these days. It was so good. There was a 15-minute skit with Tom Cruise. Again, you would think, this won't be good. There's just not enough likability here in this duo. It was very funny. They starred in The Lion King for a night. Surprised the audience. They rehearsed. And,
who played who? You don't know?
They did... Tom Cruise was the warthog.
Oh, Timon and Pumbaa.
Yes. And Corden was Timon.
Oh, right.
They sang Hakuna Matata.
Okay.
And then revealed, and the audience lost their minds.
Oh, amazing.
It was really good.
Yeah, in fairness to Corden, I'm not as big as a fan. But the carpool karaoke with Paul McCartney. Now, you might argue that anyone could have made that good TV.
I thought he was very good in Gavin and Stacey.
Very good.
Yeah, but after that, I think he lost the run of himself.
Well, the carpool karaoke is with Adele, and again, it's top.
I haven't seen that.
It's really good. She reveals she wrote a song for him because in 2020 he had hit rock bottom. He started crying in carpool karaoke. Oh. He was down with the show and down with the internet, as he put it. The snipers like Conor McKeon online writing mean things, and he got very emotional. Yeah. So he won me back over just.
And all the while freelancing as Chelsea sporting director.
Well, indeed, I was like, how did we get onto that? Okay,
what a character arc.
Yeah, just so we'll finish off the football scene as we started with it. There's a really good piece, Gav. You picked it out on the Milan Derby, which is going to be the other semi-final. Fear of losing stalks a city and its two fallen giants. Jonathan Liu here. It seems like he's gone over to Milan and spoken to various people. Interestingly, there's just a concrete sense that Inter will absolutely win. So there's a club employee who wants to remain nameless for obvious reasons because he works for Milan, and he says the final will be Manchester City against Inter, he declares glumly. In this moment, Inter are stronger. Only Pep Guardiola can help us, is the AC Milan verdict.
I think Real Madrid are saying the same thing, by the way.
Okay. And so Jonathan writes, in a weird way, I never delved too much into the Milan-Inter rivalry, so this was a really interesting piece. The Milan-Inter rivalry is a strange one. There is no real ideological, sociological or geographical divide between them. They even share a stadium. Their fans are pretty evenly spread across the city. Neighbourhoods and workplaces and schools, and often families, are divided along tribal lines. For all the fire and fervour of the two clubs' ultra groups, derbies generally pass off with very little incident. There was no hate in the Milan Derby, Andrei Shevchenko once said. And he charts their recent fall. So Champions League crown for Milan 07, the treble under Jose for Inter in 2010. But the seeds of the decline were already been sown. Berlusconi, Moratti dynasties who owned the two clubs were beginning to scale down their ambitions just as everybody else was scaling up. In 15-16, for the first time in 60 years, which is quite something, neither side represented in Europe. A revolving door of owners put Milan on the brink of bankruptcy, and Inter struggled and stagnated under the new ownership of the Sunning Group. Managers, mediocre players came and went. Inter went 6 years without Champions League football, Milan 7. And last few years, a bit of a revival. Inter won the league under Conte in 21, Milan won in 22, and there are signs that both are starting to come out of the financial wilderness. Inter, possible sale in the summer. Milan have an American private equity group, Redbird Capital, and there's a sense that neither club is going to take over the world anytime soon, but things are getting better. That was just a really good piece.
That was great.
It sets up the semi-final very nicely.
That was perfectly, yeah. The writing is class. I've always wondered about that rivalry between Milan and Inter because just so many players seem to go from between both clubs. You never really, maybe that happens a lot more in Italy, but you never really see that. Like think of pigs' heads being thrown at Luis Figo, etc. So no, it was really good. It taps into that, that horror of facing your biggest rivals in a massive game because you might lose to them. That's the worst, where mutually assured destruction looks like maybe the best possible outcome here. But it is sadly setting up a kind of a dog of a game next Wednesday. Small wonder Alessandro Nesta, veteran of the classic 0-3 semi-final that Milan won on away goals, is predicting an ugly conservative game. The two teams fear each other, he said. But no, it's a great piece.
There's something about AC Milan though, and maybe it's my vintage because of Gazzetta Football Italia and how prominent they are in the kind of nostalgia and football psyche. The world seems like a better place when AC Milan are in the Champions League semi-final for some reason. It seems like all is right with the world. Going back even to the team, the Marco van Basten, Ruud Gullit, Marcel Desailly team, that seemed for people of my age, I think that's nearly the quintessential big European team. The great, was it 4-0 they beat Barcelona? Was it the 94 Champions League final? And it always felt like a matter of when rather than if they would kind of come back to this stage. But they are slightly miffed that it's a private American equity firm that has helped get them here. Like your faith in kind of this whole, the romantic part of you that thinks that Milan will come back of the power of their own, grandness. It gets punctured a little bit when you find out that it's the same motivating forces as everywhere else.
I read out the name a moment ago. Can either of you remember the name of the American private equity group? They always have very forgettable names.
Redbird. Sorry.
You both did remember. Okay, I take it back. Redbird Capital is.
I think, is LeBron James involved in them?
Okay.
Maybe that's why. That's the Redbird's PR has worked on us too.
The only city to boast 2 European Cup winners.
Very good.
Until Manchester City win this league, or win this year, I suppose. But Milan, previous to that, the only city to have 2.
London only has 1. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, yeah.
And Chelsea would have won it for the first time in 2012. That's crazy.
Yeah. Madrid came close.
Yeah. But Real Madrid kept beating Atletico in the final.
Yeah, that undercut the 2 teams from one city. We'll take a very short break. It's half-time, by the way, in the Connacht football final. Galway are 8 points clear, 2-7 to Sligo's 5 points. Sligo started very well, but Galway have kicked on very much so since, and they will have a strong enough wind in the second half as well. We'll continue the Sunday Papers. Loads to get to with Conor McKeon and Gavin Cooney. Back in 1 moment.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Hey, it's Henry McKean here, and I'll be reporting live from Liverpool all week. The stage is set, the performers are ready, and the tension is building faster than the beat of a Eurovision song. I'm here to bring you all the action, the gossip, and the glitter from the biggest music event of the year. It's going to be Eurotastic. From the over-the-top costumes to the nail-biting competition, I'll be your guide through the Euromania. So tune into News Talk all week, and let's get this Eurovision party started.
News Talk. Conversation that counts.
And they're on the counter-attack again. There's acres of space out wide. That's a beautiful low-drilled cross. Oh, it's gone straight through the goalkeeper's legs. Where was the defence? That's 6-0. I think the home team have lost their way. Obviously, no one gave them the air code.
When you need a tradesperson, make sure you give them your unique air code to help them find your house. For your air code, visit the Finder at aircode.ie and find life easier.
Tourism businesses have a brand new mark of employer excellence, driven by the employee's voice. The Employer Excellence Programme recognises employers who consistently create better workplaces for their employees. Attract and retain top talent. Shine the spotlight on your business. The Employer Excellence Programme. Learn more at falltoireland.ie.
Guaranteed Irish business member Kilsaran continue to sustain jobs and communities across Ireland. Building a patio, putting up a fence or rendering your home, Kilsaran have a full range of construction materials including paving, walling, decorative stone, concrete blocks, coloured render, mortars and screeds to sort out any job, big or small. Available in hardware, DIY and builders merchant stores nationwide. Visit kilsaran.ie for a full list of stockists. So look out for the G. Guaranteed Irish. Altogether better.
Hi, I'm Louise Cooney and I want to tell you all about my podcast, Open Book, which is back for season 2. We've got a great cast of friends, well-known personalities and authors lined up for this season who'll be sharing the life lessons that help guide them on their path and explaining what success really means to them, as well as giving us some tips for creating your dream life and setting those all-important boundaries. Listen first to the new episodes of Open Book each Wednesday on the Go Loud app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Lorraine O'Connor from St. Peregrine's GAA Club. We recently upgraded our clubhouse to Air Gigabit Fibre Broadband for Business. Between managing our memberships online, hosting events and live streaming matches, a fast and reliable broadband connection is essential for us. It's been amazing for our club. What could it do for yours?
For more about Air Gigabit Fibre Broadband for your business or club, visit air.ie/business. Go in store or call 1800 207 407. Subject to availability. Business broadband T's and C's apply.
An evening with Lionel Richie. Performing all the hits all night long. St. Anne's Park, June 4th. With very special guests, the Human League. Tickets $69.90 on sale now from Ticketmaster.ie. Additional charges may apply, subject to licence. Lionel Richie, live in Dublin. Tickets on sale now.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now you're welcome back. If you're just tuning in, Connacht football final, Galway leading by 8 points, 2-7 to Sligo's 5 is the latest. We're in the midst of reviewing the Sunday Papers. Conor McKeon and Gavin Cooney are here. So Conor, you picked out Ireland's most underrated sports person in conversation with Paul Kimmage.
Yeah, I thought that I went straight for this morning when I saw it flagged the day before, because Seamus Power, it's very hard to compare athletes obviously in different sports, but in terms of, the global nature of golf and the level at which Seamus Power is competing, he must be one of Ireland's most successful current athletes. To make the PGA Tour is an exceptional thing, and to win on the PGA Tour puts you in the absolute bracket of a truly international sport. But he's kind of done it without drawing a whole pile of attention to themselves. And in Ireland, we very rarely allow an athlete to ascend to that level without being intimately acquainted with them.
If you walked down Grafton Street in golf attire and a golf bag that said Power, do you think Manny would clock it?
No, absolutely not.
I don't either.
No, he's managed to do, and it might be obviously like Shane Lowry. Okay, he's won a major, but before that, when he was roughly at the same level as Power, there was a much greater awareness of Lowry because he'd won the Irish Open as an amateur. So there was a very Irish angle to the story of his rise.
It was a hell of an arrival.
Yeah, it was an amazing arrival. But it's incredible. Like in Ireland, we tend to take very little interest in our athletes until they do get to a certain level. And it's amazing that Power has made it to this level, which is an extraordinarily high level in golf, without us knowing anything about it. And I was happy to see that was actually the angle that Paul Kimmage went at. Like he basically says, I've been trying to piece together the dots on Seamus Power. And I saw Power interviewed after he won was it Baltusrol? But he seemed to be very, very understated about it. And I know one or two people that know him as well, and they said that that's kind of his nature. He doesn't get too excited. He doesn't give too much away. But where the hook came into this piece was early on when Kimmage asks Pádraig Harrington about him, and about the Irish golfers on tour and the people that they're with all going out for dinner. And Harrington says, well, we've invited him, but he kind of just does his own thing. And then they kind of revisit that theme when I think Paul was at the Waste Management in Phoenix, and he was on the practice range, and Seamus Power comes onto the practice range, and there's a big spot beside Lowry and there's another one beside McIlroy, and he walks over to another one completely, and I'm sure that straight away Paul's kind of spidey senses were tingling. We have because I suppose the fear is when you interview this guy, it's just that he has no story. His story is he's a really good golfer and he's nothing else to him. But clearly there's something that makes him different, because I'd like to think that whenever I turn pro and go onto the PGA Tour, the first thing I'll want to do is hang around with Shane Lowry and Rory McIlroy, and that doesn't seem to be part of Power's motivation at all. He seems to be happy enough playing his own furrow, and they go into other aspects of it. This looks like it's at least a two-parter, because there's a teaser at the end of it for the next week's piece, but he goes into the fact that Power's mother died when he was very young, and how that affects him. And I was really surprised to see that Power kind of opened up. Like he was he was very happy to kind of speak about it, and he kind of says to Paul in the piece, I wonder myself how it kind of affected me. So I'm kind of all in for next week's one. It's teed it up nicely.
Terribly sad when he talks about his mother's, and he was only 8. What memories do you have? Not many. That's one of the saddest things. And he talks about being home 6 or 7 years ago looking for something in the house. I saw a picture and I said to my dad, who is that? And he said, what do you mean? And it was his mum, but before she got sick, because his only memories were of her when she was sick. She was going through chemo from when he was 4 or 5 years of age, and so she lost her hair, and you can only imagine how dreadful it was. And of the funeral, didn't register until you saw the coffin going into the ground. That's when it hit me. It did, yeah, because somewhere in the back of your mind you think she's not coming back, and they do chat about what effect that may have had on him. And of late he's gone back to dig into his mother's past, because he said, I do a lot of reading and I came across this thing, if you were to write your mother's eulogy, and it made me realise I don't know much about her life. So he's had emails from his dad and from his aunt, and has learned a whole host of things about her. So an amazing insight into his past.
And he lives in Las Vegas.
Yeah, and Kimmich just say to him, you seem like the least Vegas person on planet Earth, and he acknowledges that. But his cousin Nick has been there for a number of years, and so the lure of family. And I mean, I'm always fascinated, I have to say, by the financial aspect of very normal people who excel at a sport, and then they get rich beyond their wildest dreams. I think, you know, what does that do to you? And Paul Kimmich says, what did you make in Phoenix this year? And Power, more than I thought. It was 250, 260. Kimmich, it was 245. Power, yeah. What did you make at Riviera? I think about 100 more. Paul says 355. Yeah. The Arnold Palmer, 50-ish probably. 40. Yeah. What did you make at the match play? The match play probably 110 or something. Paul, 113. Power, geez, that's nuts. What did you make Sunday at the Masters? I honestly don't know. And Paul says, so you've answered the question. When did you stop looking? And Power says, you do get a text message to tell you how much you've won. What a hell, what a life. To get a text message on a Monday. So Kimmich says, you're a millionaire now, and what's that done for you? Which I just think is such an interesting question. And Power says, it hasn't done that much to me. The one thing that's nice is being able to do some cool things for friends and family, and talks about bringing them all over to Augusta, and he could pick up the tab there. So well,
that's the other thing about pro golf as well, is that success kind of breeds success in a lot of ways, because when you're a qualifier, you know, you're somebody who's coming from the Monday qualification school, and you might be waiting on somebody to drop out, and then you're getting a flight last minute, you know, on a Wednesday to a tournament, and you're playing at very awkward times. You know, that's a tough life, and that schedule doesn't really, it's not very conducive to success.
Yeah.
Once you start to have success, like Seamus Power has as well, you're now qualifying automatically for the majors. You're under no pressure to make the cut because you have money now. It's not a case of you have to pay your bills, you have to pay your caddy. And you would imagine, like with Power, with his also with his game as well, like not to be too nerdy golf about it, but like he has a very game suited to a lot of the PGA Tour events and a lot of the American golf courses. I don't think he's going to win the Open Championship, the British Open necessarily. I think he'd have more chance of winning at Augusta, but he's going to have a very long, and I would suggest very lucrative career.
I would think so. And he's improved massively in the last couple of years. I remember reading a different piece with him, and he was talking about how he practiced his wedge game with Zach Johnson, got elbow surgery and didn't realise how much his elbow was bothering him, and so in the last couple of years, sorting those few things out, he's taken a rocket ship, because I just didn't see him getting to this level, I have to say. There was and they may well get into it actually in part 2, but there's a mention there of Fred Warren, who recruited him to East Tennessee, and he did an interview where he talked about Power, and they made the offer to come to East Tennessee, and Power's aunt, who I think is mentioned in this piece as well, she's obviously been a big part of the family's life, because poor father was left trying to raise kids, and he worked 2 jobs as well. That's a big point of emphasis in this piece, to try and let the family follow their dreams. But the aunt called Fred Warren and gave him the real, like, what are you up to? You know, what do you want with Seamus, and what's going to be going on at this campus, and what are the academics like there? And so he got a call from her a couple of weeks later to say, okay, we're going to go with you. And he assumed she'd looked at the brochure, and she had actually flown to East Tennessee, looked around, made damn sure it was up to scratch for Seamus, flown home and said, okay. And I remember in the interview as well, Fred Warren saying that Power didn't just name an easy degree. First one that comes to your mind, go.
English and history.
Oof. Did it myself.
Did I? That's fine.
Didn't just do English and history, but took one of the most challenging accountancy numbers degrees and excelled at it, as well as excelling at golf. So
the thing that's really
substance.
The thing that's really interesting as well about him, and I don't know, like the degree to which he doesn't sort of knock around with the other Irish golfers.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing to me is, having watched the Full Swing thing on Netflix, as much as it would be a great life to be part of the PGA Tour, I don't think I'd be hanging around with Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth. Like, do you know what I mean? And you'd naturally gravitate towards your own anyway. And there aren't that many Irish golfers over there, so you would have to have a very not insular, but you'd have to be very sort of happy in your own skin not to.
I was curious, and maybe again to get into it in part 2, does he have mates? Or is he just anti-Irish?
But I think what's interesting about him is that, like, his is one of the most stunning rises in Irish sport in the last, pick a number, 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the guy was, it's spelled out here, July 2020, he was the 505th ranked golfer in the world.
Oh, he was clinging on.
2 years later, he was in the top 30 of the Masters, like. And like,
yeah, it's nuts.
And now he's a millionaire, as this piece points out. But he's completely, and he's also overcome very significant personal adversity, having lost his mother so young an age. But he's completely free of affectation or any notions, I suppose, would be the Irish phrase for it. And the way that is addressed at the end of this piece, I think is complete genius.
Yeah.
Because Puck Image picks out his photo, his profile picture on the PGA Tour website, and he asks him, I want you to study your face. And Seamus Power says, oh yeah, smiling away. And Paul Kimmage says, no, it's not the smile. That's the photo of a man who has never spent a moment of his life looking at himself in a mirror. And he's right, like, you should get the paper because it's printed here. It honestly looks like he's sitting down for his first school photo 20 years too late. It's honestly like has never had anyone pointed a camera squarely at him before.
Yeah.
It was such a brilliant way of approaching it. It was a great piece. I felt I didn't really know Seamus Power. Now I feel I know him a lot better, and I think... is he slightly in contention later on tonight? Probably not. He's 9 shots back or something.
Look, he'll be getting another text message to say
I'm trying to wonder
2:30.
what time did they send that text message out? Because, like,
I don't know.
If you're lying there with a hangover and obviously you go, oh, what's this now? And then you flick up your phone and it says, well, 170 grand. I'd say it's easier enough to get out of bed.
Yeah, right. We'll get a coffee. Come on. I always remember JP Fitzgerald. When Rory McIlroy won a FedEx, which is 10 million. And I presume he gets his 10%. And I always remember his line where he said, I told Rory, or I texted Rory, or something on those lines, a tsunami just hit my bank account, so thank you.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Not bad.
The money is...
Does the caddy get a text as well?
I don't know.
The money is bonkers. But
bonkers.
In fairness...
It feels unsustainably bonkers for the amount of people who seem to watch golf.
Yeah, but then...
You don't think so?
Courted the right sponsors,
shall
we say.
Listen, corporate America's in love,
but
I hear you.
What I would say is that I'm not revolted by the figures that these guys are getting when you read where Seamus Power came from. And there is an element of that they have earned this. Okay, the money in the world is crazy. But, outside the top 5, when you're going to Q school like this, he's talking about how, it's $1,200 to enter a tournament. I skipped the next one because I felt I couldn't afford it. It kind of feels like you've earned it in a sense. Okay, it's on their bonkers terms, but you have earned it. And then, I think that's one of the issues people have with Live Golf. I think they just haven't earned it.
If you did a cross-section as well of the PGA Tour leaderboard this evening or any other week, there's very few golfers of the profile of Power that actually came the route that he did or were as old as he was by the time he actually made the cut. You'll find that a lot of them were Division 1 golfers in collegiate golf in America, and they were set for stardom, and they signed a deal with Nike before they even turned pro. And that's what makes it more admirable as well. Even if you remove the Irish context from his story, he is a very interesting figure in golf.
His story, by the way, just as an aside, apropos of nothing, it's the parallels here with Bono's story. I'm listening to his audiobook at the moment, and again, it's a house where the mother passes away, and its father and in Bono's case 2 sons just left to pick up the pieces, and it's no joke. Have you listened to any of that audiobook, by the way?
No.
It is so good.
Is it? Yeah.
So good. I don't know if I would have sat down to read the book, but the audiobook is exceptional because Bono does all the voices. So when he's doing his dad's voice, he goes into full, Paul, what are you at, lad? And and then he sings bits here and there, and then there's music playing, and there's certain sound effects, and it's just treat for the ears. I'd highly recommend it. Even if you're one of those people who feels it's very fashionable to say, "Oh, Bono."
Yeah.
He's an impressive person.
Okay. Well, they sent that album to our phones. Maybe they would have been better off sending that audiobook.
Yes, he does make a quip about that. Actually, I think he's going to get into that later on. I'm only early on, but like dreadfully sad, and it does. We get an article here, but when it's across several chapters of a childhood, I mean the pain it causes to a household is hard to even get your head around when a mother dies and you've got young kids in the house. So amazing. You're right. Next week, the rise and rise of Seamus Power is promised, so we'll get more into the golf game. I want to go over to Castlebar. 45 minutes on the clock, and Galway in complete control. Colin Boyle, Galway 210, Roscommon 7 points, so they're 9 points to the good.
They are, Joe, in complete control really. Sligo just on the attack at the minute, but Catsbalanas had a shot blocked down, and really it looks like the Sligo attack and the team is out of ideas at the minute. Since they were last with us, Joe, Ian Burke kicked a score from down the right wing and then received a black card about a minute later, so he's actually been off the pitch since. I just see him now, he's getting ready to come back on. Sligo really haven't been able to make any inroads at the start of the second half, even with an extra man. Matthew Tierney scored a point straight from the throw in. Johnny Heaney scored a point from his left hand side, and Colin Sweeney, who actually came on for Shane Walsh 5 minutes into the second half. Walsh didn't look like he was injured. He was extremely quiet during the game. He didn't really get on any ball or was involved in any scores that Galway got, so he was taken off 5 minutes into the second half, and Sweeney kicked a point straight away, probably as easy score as he'll kick in a Galway jersey, uncontested. Sligo was only responsive in the Niall Murphy free and a point from Sean Carabine, but really at the minute, as Matthew Tierney lines up another one, I think that's, just put that over the bar, I think that's 2-3 for Tierney at the minute. He's absolutely flying, and that makes it 2-11 to 7. Okay,
thanks for the time being, Colin Boyle there. Galway in complete control, headed for a second Connacht title, first time they've retained it in 20 years. Just before we go, we've about 4 minutes here before an ad break, and then we'll finish off the stories on the far side of the 3 o'clock news. But just to finish off on the Provincial GAA, Conor, you picked out Dermot Crowe talking to the Clare goalkeeper Stephen Ryan, who'll be facing Kerry today. They sat down for a good hour. He's pretty confident. Now, this goes out on a Monday, so before you say Clare might give it a good go, you have to really mean it, because people will listen to this after the game. Why did you like this piece?
Well, we were actually just speaking about this beforehand. This, I thought, would be the year when we would finally see the utter futility of the provincial football championships, because they're being squashed and made more and more irrelevant by what's about to come next in the All-Ireland series. But unfortunately for advocates of getting rid of the provinces, we have Clare in a Munster final, Sligo in a Connacht final, and Louth in a Leinster football final. And that makes them endlessly better.
Even if they get hockeyed in all three?
Yeah, because I think the profile of the underdogs in intercounty Gaelic football have changed. I think to get as far as a provincial final, you have to be a good, solid, organised team. Like Sligo, okay, they're 10 points down as we speak here, but like Galway are thereabouts as All-Ireland contenders. Last week, I was in Croke Park for the Offaly Louth game, and speaking to Samuel Roy and Mickey Hart and a few people afterwards, and Louth have been kind of damned with this tag of Leinster's second best team during the year, and part of it was almost patronising, because the implication was, well, Meath and Kildare aren't up to anything this year, so somebody has to be Leinster's second best team. But they properly lived up to that potential. They embraced that, and they're in a Leinster final, and you can see the kind of confidence that comes with players knowing that they're being led in the right direction. And you can see that with Mickey Hart and Gavin Devlin. And the same thing applies to the Clare players. They know that Colm Collins has their best interests at heart. They know that they're getting close to their absolute maximum. And even if their record against Kerry over the last 10 years in championship football has been really, really poor, it's the one, you would say that Clare's record against Kerry is one of the reasons why dividing the championship up in geographical bases is an absolute disaster. But I think in the Gaelic grounds tomorrow they'll give a different account of themselves. Today they give a different account of themselves, because they're a properly well organised team. Like teams like that, they don't kind of walk blindfolded into these matches anymore. They know what they're going to get. They're able to measure themselves in preparation as to what's going to come. And I think Clare being in a Munster final, the same as Louth and the same as Sligo, it's inherently a good thing for Gaelic football.
Okay. Anything about this piece jump out at you from Stephen Ryan, the Clare goalkeeper?
I read it so long ago now I can't exactly remember. But
there's a lovely bit in it where he's coming back. Was it Kieran Lillis is the goalkeeper's name? Lillis is definitely the surname. I'm really sorry if I got Sorry, Mark Lillis. Kieran Lillis is a different player. He played all the championship games with Clare. I think it's 5 games, and Stephen Ryan comes in for what it proves to be the final game of the championship, and everyone was allowed to keep their jerseys at the end of the year, and Stephen Ryan obviously has number 1 on his back, but gives that to Mark Lillis. I thought that was just a nice little insight into the kind of person that he is.
Yeah. I mean, he came across very well. He gave a full hour to Dermot Crowe, is almost what jumped out to me.
This is the other thing that we were discussing,
unusual.
And this is a very journalisty thing to speak about as well, but when teams like that come into prominence, Clare, Louth, Sligo, they're very, very happy to kind of give their time. They're happy to engage, and I think it boosts. That's another reason it actually boosts the kind of profile around the provincial finals. I would suggest that this year, despite the fact that they lack any real relevance in the overall context, that the provincial football finals have gotten a lot more airtime and newspaper space and everything else than they would have done in previous years, where you might have had a Cork-Kerry final or a Dublin-Meath final or whatever it might be.
Yeah, true. Well, we're going to come back to GAA. There's an interesting piece on Punditry, as there is most Sundays, and also Michael Dignan giving GAAGO the thumbs up. He wasn't a fan of Sky, but thinks GAAGO is a good service. So touch on that in just a moment. Back with Conor and Gavin after 3 o'clock news.
Join the conversation at Newstalk FM on Facebook for the latest headlines, videos and thought-provoking podcasts.
He's dribbling down the wing. He's past 1. He's past 2. He gives and he goes again. He gets it back and he's clear. All he has to do is finish it off. Oh, and he's missed. All he had to do was send it home. It seemed like he didn't know where the goal was.
Yeah, he obviously never got the air code.
When you need a tradesperson, make sure you give them your unique air code to help them find your house. For your air code, visit the finder at aircode.ie and find life easier.
Happy news from Aldi. We've topped the leaderboard at the National Parenting Product Awards with 22 wins, making us the most awarded retailer. There were golds for our organic Mamia baby food range, Mamia Ultra Dry Junior Plus nappies size 5 plus, and Mamia Premium Newborn Mini size 2 nappies voted the nation's best nappies by parents in Ireland. So, Mum and Dad, not using Mamia nappies yet? Whew, could be time for a change. Aldi, every day amazing.
The world is moving fast and changing faster. That is why we have come together, a group of established wealth management companies united by a shared vision for a new future. We are Unio, a new breed of wealth manager with deep expertise and prestigious global backing. With a digital experience not seen before, a wealth of wisdom to make a world of difference. Visit unio.ie, a new world awaits. Unio Financial Services Limited, trading as Unio Wealth Management, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Guaranteed Irish business members like Peninsula continue to sustain jobs and communities across Ireland. Peninsula is committed to delivering professional excellence in HR and employment law services. With over 25 years of supporting businesses all over Ireland, Peninsula's approach tailors HR services specifically for your needs. Success starts here. Visit peninsulaireland.com or call 1-800 719029 to schedule your complimentary HR consultation. So look out for the G. Guaranteed Irish. Altogether better.
Witness greatness live from the players you love with Sky Sports from Virgin Media. Virgin Media customers get an exclusive front row seat to unmissable moments by adding Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports for just €30 a month for 6 months. That's better than half price. Be part of every game with Virgin Media. It's playtime.
6-month offer, €74 a month after offer. T's and C's apply. See virginmedia.ie.
Follow at Newstalk FM on TikTok for the latest news, reports and trends from our presenters and reporters. On 106 to 108 FM, on the Newstalk app, powered by Go Loud and smart speakers. This is Newstalk.
Good afternoon, the news with Alan Cantwell. The UN's nuclear watchdog has expressed extreme concern for the safety of Europe's biggest nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Fighting has been taking place near the site in Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia. Anti-nuclear advocate and CEO of Chernobyl Children International, Adi Roach, says a no-war zone must be declared around the plant.
We cannot overstate the current critical situation that's developing and that has been developing since the occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I mean, the first main thing to say that this has changed the nature of modern warfare as we know it, the weaponizing and the militarizing of nuclear power stations, and it remained untenable.
An investigation is underway after 8 people were shot dead in Texas in the United States. 7 others were injured, 3 critically. Hundreds of people were evacuated from a shopping mall when a gunman stepped out of a car and opened fire in Allen, a suburb of Dallas. A police officer who just happened to be close by shot the man dead. A man is being questioned in connection with the discovery of a woman's body in Sligo earlier this week. The remains of the woman in her 50s was found at a home in the town on Monday evening. A man in his 30s was arrested on suspicion of murder. And there are renewed calls for a citizens' assembly on education. The Educate Together network says successive governments have failed to provide full access to multi-denominational education in Ireland. CEO Emer Nolan says their 117 schools around the country are thriving, but many parents still have no choice but to send their children to Catholic schools. She says there's widespread consensus that the Irish school systems need to be changed.
The government has committed to a citizens' assembly on education, which is great. And what we're saying is that needs to be brought forward. It needs to happen now. There is strong support for the idea of increased choice in education, but there isn't a consensus on how to proceed. And we think that a citizens' assembly is the ideal forum to build momentum for real change, and that it provides the basis for a consensus approach for specific steps.
That's it for now. We'll have more in an hour.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Bin the Father's Day socks. Give Dad a Ryanair gift card from his #1 baby.
Sunny and dry this afternoon. It will turn cloudier as the day goes on with outbreaks of rain moving in this evening. Highest temperatures 17 to 19 degrees in moderate, occasionally fresh southerly breezes. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now you're welcome back. So Galway 10 points to the good against Sligo, 2-13 to 9 points. Sligo about to bring it back to 9. They're into the wind. But regardless, you would think Galway in very firm control of that game. 57 minutes on the clock. We'll go back to Colin Boyle in just a moment. In the meantime, we are reviewing the Sunday papers. We have Conor McKeon of The Independent, Gavin Cooney of The 42 here in the studio. By dint of Michael Dignan's piece where he's approving of GAAGO, he was very much anti-Sky a couple of years ago. But just before we get into that, as we watch Galway win and presumably Kerry beat Clare, I think a lot of people, Conor, are starting to look at the group stages, the inaugural group stages in Sam Maguire 2023. So 16 teams go through, the 4 provincial winners, the 4 beaten finalists, Westmeath by dint of winning the Tailteann Cup in 22, and then the next 7 ranked teams based on the Football League. So the thing here is Mark O'Shea in his piece, he's basically writing about Kerry out of their game today and saying how they need to get a move on. But at the same time, he says, I'm not quite sure when the championship starts. It's hard to know. So he says somebody texted him about one of the groups and said it was the group of death. And he said, steady on. 3 of 4 teams qualified. There's nothing deathy about it. So in Group 1, let's pick our 3 teams to go through here. In Group 1, and I'm assuming Kerry beat Clare, it's Kerry, Louth, Mayo, Cork. Kerry, Mayo and... Okay, so that's alive.
Well, Louth beat Cork in the league. So.
Okay, so that's not a done deal.
No.
In Group 2, we have Galway. Who's going to lose between Armagh and Derry, by the way?
Armagh.
Okay. We've Galway, we have Armagh, we have Tyrone, we have Westmeath. That was the group of death, apparently, but sure. Galway, Armagh and Tyrone will go through there.
Yes.
Okay. Group 3, Dublin, Sligo, Roscommon, Kildare. Who won't progress there?
You want me to say Kildare, don't you?
No.
Sligo. I don't know. Maybe Sligo, yeah.
Okay, so Dublin, Roscommon, Kildare go through. Group 4, so you have Derry as the winner. So Derry, Clare, Monaghan, Donegal. On current form, Donegal.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Do you think these groups, one, will have a bit of jeopardy to the end, and then two, what effect will they have on the All-Ireland series as it gets down to business?
Well, there's a couple of things. Like, firstly, so there's a lot of games to get rid of 4 teams.
A lot of games, yeah.
But I suppose the devil is in the detail with this. The way the groups finish up on the last day are the matches in neutral venues, and that's when Seed 1 plays Seed 2 and Seed 3 plays Seed 4. So usually in groups you might have a couple of dead rubbers, but there won't be this time around.
Because you've Seed 3 against Seed 4.
So Seed 3 against Seed 4 is going to form will be which team makes it through and which team gets knocked out. Seed 1 against Seed 2 going to form is who tops the group. Now, the big thing about topping the group is you get a weekend off. You go into a quarter-final as opposed to a preliminary quarter-final. That might seem like a small thing, but it's not, because for a team to go through the group stage into a preliminary quarter-final and then to go on to a quarter-final, semi-final and a final, you're talking about 7 matches in 9 weeks.
Okay.
And that's starting only 2 weeks after your provincial final. So that's a savage programme of games. You know, if you look at Kerry, like, I think Kerry are All-Ireland favourites because they won the All-Ireland last year and done nothing wrong this year. But part of you was watching them this year with
they haven't done much right this year either.
Yeah, but that's what All-Ireland champions do.
Yeah.
But part of you was kind of looking at them saying, well, if they're going to have to come through this programme of fixtures in the championship, they're going to need a deeper squad. And so far they haven't actually cultivated that. It's pretty much the same team as last year.
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to get injured. You're going to have to rotate for certain matches. And as we said, it's not a case of you win your first 2 matches in the group and then you take the last weekend off, because you're giving yourself an extra weekend off with 1 fewer round if you go and win it. So I think it's going to be really good. We're going to have there's a novelty factor to it, first of all, which I think is pretty good. But I think it'll have more or less the same effect that the round robin in the provincial championships has had. You know, you've a higher. Like, I was a kind of a cautious fan of the Super 8s, insofar as you were getting more games against where teams played each other that were at a particular level. The problem with that was that it was so exclusive. You know, you had 8 teams that were having this drastically extended season, whereas everyone else was just out.
Yeah.
It's different now. It's 16 teams. That might seem slightly too much. You might have 5 or 6 teams that might struggle to compete. But it also gives the Tailteann Cup, I think, an added value that you can qualify for this thing next year. So I'd be very optimistic about this. I think it's the right idea. And the big unfairness about the provincial championships, where if you were, say, drawn in Ulster preliminary round, you have to win 4 very strong games as opposed to what Kerry have to do and Munster or Dublin have to do in Leinster. That's nearly irrelevant now. You know, like, once you qualify for the All-Ireland series, everybody's starting from the same position.
Okay. Let's go back to Castlebar. 61 minutes on the clock. Galway 2-15, Sligo 11 points. So that 10-point lead bubble, Colin Boyle, seems fairly consistent now for the last quarter or so.
Yeah, it has, Joe. Look, it's not really as much changed. It pretty much is the Matthew Tierney show here. He's kicked 2-5, 2-4 from play, and he's just been so dominant in many aspects of the Galway play. Interestingly, his man Derek Cummins was taken off there a couple of minutes ago. He actually kicked his 3rd point from play just before he was taken off, so that got a couple of groans from the Sligo crowd. Also interestingly, Damien Comer, Shane Walsh and Rob Ferranti have all been taken off in the second half, and none of them actually got a score from play before they were taken off. And considering Galway have scored 2-15, it is a bit of a surprise, but a really comfortable day for Galway. They're absolutely cruise control, and they're just looking really to play out the last 7 or 8 minutes here without picking up any nicks, I'd say, ahead of a big game in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, very good, Colin. Thank you. So Galway 2-15, Sligo 11 points, 10-point margin. Galway about to retain their Connacht title for the first time in 20 years. Fellas, Michael Dignan on page 65 of the Mail on Sunday. Why I have changed my mind on pay-per-view option to watch games is the headline. He references a couple of years ago where he went viral really when he had an outburst, as he calls it, against Sky a couple of years ago. It was unrehearsed and emotional, struck a chord with lots of people. And he said, as the Sky coverage went on, some people loved it, but he was talking about the cost here more so. I checked this week, Sky Sports package will cost you €22 for the first 6 months, and then full cost of €39 for the next 6. That total is €365 for the year, and then the following year without the promotion it's nearly €500, and that's only for sport. And he's talking about the appetite for games now. Back in 2018, RTE showed 40 live games. This year the figure is 69 games, and still people want more. So he said if people want to see more, then you have to find a way. GAAGO is an attempt to meet the demand. The package is €79 for a season pass. There's a discount for GAA members. It works out at about roughly €2 a game when you take in the 38 matches on offer. GAA Club can get the package for €150. Pub can get one for €300. And he says, I've seen firsthand in my role as Offaly chair that GAAGO have been in touch with our PRO to provide a link for free access to nursing homes and to care homes, which is a lovely touch. You have to say, it's a great value package. The production is quality via RTE. In terms of analysis, you have a whole cast of past players who know what they're talking about. For that sort of product, I don't think it's expensive. It's manageable for most people. He does throw in the caveat. The one issue seems to be the rural broadband. I was talking to Anthony Daly recently. He was telling me how he had issues in his own pub last Saturday when they were showing the thrilling Clare Limerick game, how the coverage unspooled at different stages. You can imagine the reaction amongst hurling fans on the premises. Dear, you'd love to see it. So Michael Dignan makes the point, €79, 38 matches, high quality production values. Let's be fair, that is reasonable and manageable for most people, so fair enough, he says.
Yeah, can't argue with it. I mean, it's a great service for those, for the established fans. The only issue, and I think there's been a bit of cavilling lately about, the Cork Tip game last night, why wasn't that on TV? I believe that was on GAAGO. Yeah. It's just like the downside here is the casual sports fan who realises 15 minutes into a Munster hurling game because they check their Twitter or hear something on the radio, oh hang on, this game is on, it's really great. There's been an established culture going back decades that big Munster hurling game, sure it'll be an RTE, but the landscape has changed now. So I think the only real valid criticism that I've seen of it is the hassle that goes into setting it up, and maybe there's not that much hassle at all, but it is more hassle than just flicking on your remote.
Yeah, I like there's a lot of people are kind of torn on this, and there seems to be this kind of idea that the matches that are on pay-per-view have been put behind this Sky Go wall as though they were always visible. Like they weren't, like the Munster Championship until 2018 used to be 5 games long, and prior to the mid-90s most championship games weren't on television, so it's not as if these games are now being kind of hidden out of sight. This is an additional thing. People probably won't appreciate this, but they do need to appreciate that the GAA is not in a very advantageous position when it comes to selling the broadcast rights to its games. RTE have a cultural claim on a lot of those games, so I don't know how that deal works out too well. And when Sky didn't want to pony up for whatever deal that they were looking for, it wasn't a very competitive market for the GAA, so they had to do something. So you can either show the games or not, and to show the games costs money. Like that's the bottom line. And I think the issue here maybe is that the GAA are a small bit ahead of the curve. Like they've embraced the future of major sports bodies broadcasting their own games, because they've had to. Like I'm not sure that RTE have the capacity to put on any more games. I saw people giving out yesterday that they were showing the Coronation, but they weren't showing the Dublin Wexford game, as though it was kind of a choice of one or the other, and they decided to go with Charles getting his new hat. Like, but
it's a punchy tweet, though.
It is a punchy tweet. There's no doubt about it. But Michael Dignan has it here. The GAAGO package of €79 for a season pass, 38 matches. Now, we all have, like, it's a feature of modern living. We all have our subscriptions to our podcasts or whatever.
Yeah, they start to add up when all of them are just $5 a month.
Yeah, but like somebody was tweeting or somebody was talking to me last night on a WhatsApp message and said it was a disgrace he had to pay €12 for a single game. That is a lot.
Yeah,
like
it is.
Like if you're paying €12 into a league match, fair enough, you're there in the flesh. But I would suggest that it is good value so long as you're actually able to access it. It would be an absolute killer to be watching it over some sort of scratchy connection that you weren't able to properly stream it.
Yeah, which isn't the GAA's fault, of course.
Yeah, but I think the GAA had very limited options here. The thing that I was worried about was that you were going to pay this money for effectively a feed of a match. But when you're watching it, there's no difference between the rote of analysts, like they're very good. You're used to seeing them. Gráinne McElwain is an excellent presenter. It's basically like watching a match on RTE. Like if you can access it and you're interested, I don't see the downside to it. And I think the overall package is very, very reasonable. You know, because the alternative is you don't get to see these matches at all. You know, like RTE can't have a hurling channel on a Saturday. It just doesn't work like that. And there are so many matches there that, you know, we're in a very privileged age as consumers of sport. Like when a match isn't on the television that we want to watch, we all kind of lose our marbles and go searching for dodgy streams to make sure we watch it. But you know, it wasn't always the case that there was some avenue through which to view everything that we want to see.
No, that's a fair point as well. On the issue of television coverage, invariably talking about people who talk about sport is pastime for lots of us. So for the second week in a row, there's a big piece in the Sunday Independent taking very square aim at RTE. Last week it was Joe Molloy who was saying effectively that the GAA coverage in RTE was either a source of national shame or national embarrassment. It was one of the two. It was one of the two. He's Molloy today is writing about the wellness industry, which has been an issue he's talked about a lot lately. So that's what he's writing about this afternoon. But so he wrote about the coverage last week. Eamon Sweeney this week on the back page of the Sunday Independent. Talk isn't cheap, it's priceless. TV Punditry has rejected the very thing that made it worth watching. And he takes Ted Walsh's retirement as a jumping off point. After which Eamon Dunphy was on the front page, I think, of the Star, saying that RTE wanted to destroy Punditry. Anyone with a personality is out or a brain, he declared. Joe Molloy said of the GAA coverage, there is no sense from RTE now that this is supposed to be entertainment. RTE's divergence from the bland approach favoured by British broadcasters was once a source of national pride. He talks about Dunphy, Giles, Bill Hurley, McGurk, Hook, Pope, Molloy, O'Rourke, Spillane, Jerry Kiernan, Ted Walsh. And he said they led not so much a national conversation as a national argument, and you didn't need to agree with their opinions to respect the honest, intelligent, entertaining way they were expressed. Their airs don't excite the same passions. Preference for agreement rather than argument has turned them into strangely peripheral figures. Half-time and post-match discussions are no longer required viewing. The anchors seem overly keen to avoid controversy on RTE's GAA coverage, although he does say Michael Lester was often the same, but previous panellists were strong enough to override the host's caution and make their point anyway. Today's crop aren't. That inability may be a generational thing. Younger pundits seem spooked by the possibility of online criticism, which is an interesting observation. One I think, Gav, you agree with.
Yeah, like stuff like, you know, RTE wanting to destroy Punditry and Joe Molloy saying anyone with a personality or brain is out is hyperbole and is very disrespectful to a lot of people working in those roles. But I think if you compare RTE's Punditry output now to what it was 10 or 15 years ago, it is, I would agree that it is blander and less interesting than it was. I think there's a few parts of it. I think one of it is definitely Twitter. I definitely think Twitter has kind of ruined a lot of sports punditry because no one should be that aware in real time of the criticism that's going to follow their way for expressing an opinion. And the way it works is that regardless of the opinion you express, someone is going to criticise you. So you often see it now, or you get the sense that people are kind of preempting the criticism and leavening their own opinion with it, which is not conducive to good punditry or good comment at all.
Do you think, though,
I think it's understandable,
20 years ago, Eamon Dunphy or Molloy would have given two proverbial what Twitter was saying? I asked that because we did a roadshow at Graham Souness this week. I'm not sure if the interview's gone out yet, but effectively he was saying it was not his decision to leave Sky, and but we were talking to him about social media and how it's changed punditry, because Sky have almost leaned in.
Well, that's the other way it's ruined it, yeah.
And Souness was saying that, like, at the ad breaks, his colleagues, you can guess who they are, all whip out their phones to see which way the wind is blowing.
Oh God,
and
that's brutal.
It doesn't soften their cough. You know, they still go for it.
Yeah.
And they're probably getting lots of criticism. So maybe it's a personality issue.
Maybe it's a personality thing there. You need to be of a singular personality to be able to deal with that. Yeah. And we're also Molloy, Dunphy, we're still reading these guys in newspapers and we're listening to their podcasts, etc., because they're brilliant pundits.
Yeah.
They're one of the things, you know, when people criticise RT management for allowing this atmosphere to take hold, one of it is just you don't have these one-off characters anymore. I think these people, they were brilliant at what they did. Like, I mean, there are other ways in which the comparisons aren't as, like, the Irish punditry isn't as good as it used to be. I mean, talking about Souness, like, Souness is this, like, growling giant of British punditry. He was a supporting cast member on RTE. You know what I mean? I interviewed him once about a few years ago, and he loved being on with Dunphy. The phrase he used, like, I have no idea what grenade he's going to roll over under my seat.
We played him in the road show. Well, who have you managed? Managed to stay alive for 68 years, baby. We played it to him, and
it's great stuff. Like,
watching him watch it, he loved it.
But he was also there for the quintessential moment of that RTE panel. Souness was sitting in on. It was an England World Cup game, I assume in 2006. England have disgraced themselves again, and they play Gareth Crooks' interview with Sven-Göran Eriksson. It's such a softball interview, and Dunphy comes back and says, that, Bill, is the first time I've seen sex between two men broadcast on the BBC. So, and that typified that RTE
Bill
panel.
Said, I know,
with a smile on his face, because I know, in a say more like that, you know.
Yeah.
But like that typified the whole thing. It's just like, we're going to say these things that you're not going to get away with on the BBC, and you're not going to see on British television. But it's changed in the last 10 years or so. Like, what the British punditry output is actually broadly very, very good.
So good.
Carragher and Neville, when they're not doing their Punch and Judy set or like Liverpool Man United fan zone TV stuff on Twitter and on those games, they're honestly, I've never seen television analysis better than, you know, the Monday Night Football thing where they properly put in the work. What they're doing is they're doing a very high level thing very, very well. And I know there's a criticism in this piece about using too many stats. I think sometimes, I don't know, I think Monday Night Football are in a good position in the sense, like, they've got like this incredible stats package by Opta that costs millions, or costs thousands at least anyway, that they have access to that not all other sports have.
Their stats are super interesting.
They're so,
like, their stats are used to make a point.
The argument comes first and then the stats comes to support it.
Yeah, it's not just a sheet on a screen saying comparing wides
completely contextless, whereas I think in other things, like, the stats come first and then you're like, well, the stats say this, so my argument follows thus. They begin with the argument and look at the stats to support it. So so that's a bit of a brain dump. And also, you know, one other persistent issue that I've talked about here before is the continuing lack of desks on these shows. I mean, old punditry is about 30% better for having a desk there, for allowing ex-pros to sit behind.
I think those kind of computer generated spaceship kind of images of the studios, I can't think of anything that would be less conducive to somebody saying something entertaining than sitting in such a very sterile and confected kind of environment. Like, but from the Irish point of view, like, it used to be a source of great national pride.
Eamon Sweeney says that, yeah.
We used to watch Match of the Day, and it was Des Lynam and Trevor Brooking and Alan Hansen, and it was all so polished and dripping with honey and all the rest of it, and like, it was fine. And then you turn on and you wouldn't know who was not talking to each other between Brady, Giles and Dunphy. And maybe you could say that they're another degree removed from the people they're talking about, but they spared absolutely nobody. And I think that particular brand of punditry did maybe hit its sell-by date too, because with the advent of information, you kind of have to use it then. It's no good enough to say, well, we don't know a lot about the Colombians, Bill. Well, everyone else does, so you have to have something. But by the same token, there's nothing that turns you off punditry quicker than you watch the thing and you're looking at them and looking down at their sheet and talking about, this Sligo centre back, and you know that this is stuff that they've prepared to kind of speak about, because it doesn't really add anything to it. It has to be like, whether your preference is for controversy or the Roy Keane thing, or your preference is for heavy analysis, it's like journalism. The golden rule is don't be boring, and the problem is too much of an extreme on either side is very boring.
It's probably never been harder to do it well, and you make the point very well. Like, I think the viewers have never known so much before as well. Like, I mean, you're being judged at a much higher bar now, I think, as well. So I think it's probably harder to do well now than ever before because of that feedback loop through social media and the fact that everyone...
I agree with that, because it's really funny, I went back and found myself watching the post-match to the 1994 Ireland win over Italy at the World Cup on RTE.
It's very niche.
It was very bad.
Did they have a panel of people, like an audience?
People, yeah.
No, that was bad, yeah.
It's bad. Like, by today's standards, it wouldn't be accepted. It would be slammed. And of course, look, that panel really, they seem to just culminate and hit their straps, late 90s, and had a golden 15 years. But like, they've been doing it for maybe 15 years before that. They've become very comfortable. The chemistry had been built up year after year after year. I think one of the issues, perhaps, in a TV studio, having had a bit of experience, is RTE do it. They mix up the panellists.
But there's too many people on the Sunday game.
And it's the same in the... I would say, watching the soccer coverage, you turn on an Ireland International, you don't know who you're getting, either in the presenter chair or in the 3 seats next to the presenter. And so how can any chemistry begin to develop? There's not enough continuity in the team, Bill, is what I'm saying. But like, really, people, if they're going to have an argument with each other or really disagree with each other, it helps if they've been out for a few drinks. It helps if they've done it 20 times before. It helps if they're friendly. So at least they can turn to each other during the ad break and say, no hard feelings, no hard feelings. Because it's funny, when like an argument happens on air, like, it is
an argument.
It's not great sometimes. I know through the prism of TV, you're very relaxed. You're sitting there in your sweatpants and you're not at all stressed. But in 3D, in reality, it's a real thing. And so you are never, ever, ever, if you're in any way like a normal human being, and somebody next to you who you don't know, aside from a cup of coffee beforehand and a how you, says something you disagree with, you're going to have to really disagree with before on national TV you cut the legs from under a complete stranger.
Yeah.
And surrounded by 2 other people that you may not have worked with before. So I think the lack of a coherent, regular dynamic holds back fights.
I enjoyed the tension when, say, Donal Logue and Shefflin were on the same punditry group in Croke Park. Like, you could tell that there was a general, not a culture war, but there was a slight ideological issue that they were both passionately behind, and there was antipathy there from a previous life as players. And by the same token, I don't watch any rugby punditry really. Like, I don't really like to find out how the sausages are made in rugby.
Well, the Six Nations coverage in Virgin apparently is top.
I heard that, but I did watch it because people were talking about it when Eddie O'Sullivan and Jamie Hislop were on the same panel, that there was fantastic sort of crackling tension between the two of them, and I found that very interesting to watch. Now, that's a
short shelf life.
Yeah, but it was like,
it's good at the time.
It was the only one I watched. But by the same token, if you want to go back to the Sunday game, like, it'd be very rare that I wouldn't switch it on if Joe Brolly was on it, because he wouldn't have to necessarily agree what he was going to say. He would say something articulate. It might be off the wall. You might be really annoyed by it, but that's the nature of it. It's entertaining. And the same thing, like, Ger Loughnane went very quietly from the Sunday game hurling panel, and it was because of his brand of punditry that I think he explained this in a column in the Star a couple of years ago after he went. He said that it was too personalised, But that's... And Brolly makes this point all the time in his columns, when people go to the pub after a match, that's how they talk about the game.
But you have a duty of care then to the players you're talking about. You can't talk about them on television the way you would talk about them in a pub.
No,
there's a happy medium for sure.
No, but I think there is a happy medium, but sometimes it's slightly disingenuous, when people try and sugarcoat the thing too much, or they go too heavy. Like, I was at a hurling match last night. I was at Dublin Wexford in Croke Park. I just went along for a look, so I wasn't keeping notes. And what was very obvious by the time we left was that Wexford should have won the game, and afterwards we found out that the screen came up, Wexford had 19 wides and Dublin had 6, and Dublin won by 2 points. So there's a statistic that if you don't have it, you're not doing your job as an analyst. But sometimes I think you get the impression that they're mentioning and referencing statistics just because that they're there, and I don't think that adds very much to it.
And it's also, it's particularly keenly felt in Gaelic football now, in my opinion, because that is a sport that is more interesting when it's talked about than when it's watched at the moment. I find Gaelic football at the moment a lot more interesting than I find it entertaining. I think that's why this is particularly keenly felt at the moment.
I think we're coming through the other side of a kind of a difficult thing for a period for GAA, Gaelic football inter-county analysis, because for a while there was a kind of, well, I don't like this game because I don't like the way that it's played, and that's nearly where the conversation ended, and it became quite derogatory and all the rest of it. And it's fair enough to say that you don't find the particular style of football enjoyable, and the first time that somebody called it puke football, Pat Spillane, that was very interesting, but I found the analysis very boring of last year's Ulster final, because it was just, well, this is very boring. Both teams are playing with a deep block. Nobody wants to get any man forward, and it's not much to watch. But I've kind of heard those opinions about those kind of games, and you were probably looking for a little bit more than simply the taste of what the pundit likes, you know, because like, we're all watching the game at that stage. Like, if you're watching an Ulster final and it's like that, you're invested enough in Gaelic football to make up your own mind about whether you want to enjoy it or not. You've made that choice already. And I think in that stage you probably wanted to be enlightened a small bit more. I think that's maybe where the statistics might have been a bit more of a useful tool.
Just a final point, we're pretty much out of time. Just to give it a very brief mention, Mathieu Flamini has gone from Arsenal footballer to biotech CEO. He's interviewed in the Sunday Times magazine. So GF Biochemicals. He's 39 years of age now, Flamini. Ironically, he was the source of the argument between Souness and Dunphy and Giles that time.
Was he?
Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Why was he sold to Milan?
I hope that's above the CEO thing on his CV.
It should be. It should be. He's doing very well for himself. For instance, in May 2022, after speaking to Arsene Wenger to get the lowdown on Flamini, there was an investment in his company of €15 million from Sofinova. And GFB Biochemicals, if you're interested, was founded in 2010. And what it's trying to do, I mean, it's brilliant, really. It's trying to get ingredients from biodegradable waste with the intention of replacing so-called forever chemicals. So there are a bunch of things in a whole range of products we use which never decompose. Terrible for the environment. Synthetic, fluorinated, hydrocarbons. They're integral to a wide range of everyday household goods. They don't break down, and so they're harmful to both our health and the natural world. So the shampoo, he says, he's talking here at length, the shampoo we use, the cream we put in our bodies, the shower gel, most of it is based on petroleum products, Flamini says. When you start telling people that story, they go, wow, I didn't realise. Maybe I should be a tiny bit more careful about what I buy. When you use shampoo with silicone, the silicone accumulates in the water and it basically never degrades. The interviewer says, at times it is hard to get a word in with Flamini. Over the past decade, GF Biochemicals has developed more than 200 patents for plant-based solvents and plasticizers. He's an interesting dude. Started off in Marseille, was doing a law degree before he realised he's bloody good at football. He has no scientific background whatsoever. I'm surrounded by PhDs, people who have a lifetime of experience in the field. Every day I come out with very naive questions. The company employs 50 people, from engineers, sales, marketing, etc. He started this company when he was still at Milan, would be wearing a suit to training. There would be much hilarity in the dressing room. Who does this guy think he is? Well, these days, the interviewer is trying to find out if Mathieu is a billionaire. She asks him outright, are you a billionaire? And she's estimated the worth of the company he's founded. He says, the company is a private one. We don't really communicate about the value. So that means he pretty much is a billionaire. And he says, in 20 years of my career, he's talking here about the drive that, it takes of football players to play at a high level and how they're told to stay in their lane. But he says, in 20 years of my career, there wasn't one day I didn't wake up or go to bed feeling pain everywhere in my legs. You constantly have to push your limits. And this is something you also face as an entrepreneur. You have to constantly push your limits, keep going. So he says the transition has been very smooth. He's an unmarried man, has no kids, is flying around the world. And as they would say on Succession, has at least a bill.
Taking the oil out of the product is probably easier to do there than in football.
Pretty impressive. Founded that in 2010. It'd be very easy to take your 6-figure salary a week and say, well, I've got 15 million, I don't need to do much.
Do we think that he is the richest pro or former pro footballer? If he's a billionaire, does he have more than Messi and Ronaldo?
Well, Ronaldo's just picked up 400 million net.
Fair enough.
That's halfway to a bill. Isn't it very obnoxious to call it a bill? I feel on Instagram Reels I keep getting like these young lads in their 20s coming at me talking about like a millionaire is nothing, you need to have a bill. Have you noticed that trend?
It puts those text messages that Seamus Power gets in the morning perspective.
It does. So good man Mathieu Flamini, and it's not he's helping the world as well, so it's very impressive. Fellas, we're out of time. Thank you both so much. Gavin Cooney of The42, thank you, and Conor McKeon of The Independent. Pleasure, fellas.
Thanks, Joe.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.